Hey Spurs fans, welcome back to another update on our San Antonio Spurs. Before we jump into today's breaking news, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. And here's something special for you. Everyone who subscribes and leaves a comment with their name and the city they're watching from will automatically be entered into our giveaway to win an official San Antonio Spurs jersey. So don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and comment your name and city below. Stay tuned, because the next Spurs fan wearing the jersey could be you. Victor Wembanyama has been sidelined since November 14th due to a strain in his left calf, and the prolonged absence has already ceased to be a simple injury update to become a deadline he must resolve quickly. The possibility of a return for the NBA Cup quarterfinal match against the Los Angeles Lakers was considered, but the San Antonio Spurs chose to rule the athlete out of the matchup, a decision that increases the pressure on his recovery timeline and on his individual ambitions for the end of the season. The concern revolves around a straightforward calculation. League players lose eligibility for awards if they exceed the limit of absences, and that threshold is 17 missed games. With the announced absence for this week's game, Wembanyama now tallies 12 games without stepping on the court, a number that dangerously brings him closer to the red line that could cost him recognition when voting takes place at the end of the campaign. More than cold statistics, this scenario has practical consequences. Rehabilitation for a calf injury requires balance between rest, intensive physiotherapy, and a gradual progression of workload. Rushing this process increases the risk of setbacks. On the other hand, delaying the return reduces the player's exposure window to voters and, consequently, his chances of maintaining prominence in end-of-year rankings. The equation is simple and unforgiving. Returning too early can harm him physically. Waiting too long can affect his standing politically within the league. While the medical plan defines daily steps, the Spurs collective has delivered responses on the court that partially mitigate the effects of missing their greatest talent. The team has won 8 of 11 games played without him, including 2 NBA Cup matchups that allowed their qualification for the quarterfinals. This performance creates a dual narrative. On one hand, it reduces the fan base's immediate anxiety because the results are coming. On the other, it places on the player the demand for a return that justifies his immediate reinstatement to the starting lineup as soon as he is ready, since the team has proven it can win without relying exclusively on his presence. If victory over Los Angeles is confirmed, San Antonio will advance to Saturday's semifinals, where they will face the winner between Phoenix and Oklahoma City. The NBA Cup final is scheduled for the following Tuesday. This schedule compresses decisions. The available time for reintegration is short, and any readaptation plan must be executed with clockwork precision. The period between a potential return and decisive games is too small for slow testing. In season averages, Wembanyama continues to post a striking influence. He leads the Spurs in scoring with 26.2 points per game. He also dominates the rebounding charts with 12.9 and maintains an impressive defensive presence by leading blocking statistics with 3.6 per game. These totals not only sustain his reputation, but create an explicit contrast between what the team loses in his absence and how much the group has adapted its play style. From a technical standpoint, the calf is a region that absorbs major load in explosive movements, jumps, and landings, all central actions in the repertoire of a player with Wembanyama's length and reach. Ideal rehabilitation follows stages: reduction of swelling and pain, regaining mobility, gradual strength work, and finally reintroduction of plyometrics and sport-specific contact drills. Each stage requires careful observation and objective indicators to advance, because overextending too early may mean several more weeks without playing. There is also a psychological component. The athlete experiences tension between his competitive ambition to return and decide games and the need to preserve his body in the long term. This tension weighs not only on him, but also on the coaching staff, the front office, and the fans who follow each update with expectation and sometimes impatience. Managing this balance will determine whether his return is sustainable or just a temporary pause leading to new complications. Analysts point out that, in terms of awards, time on court is not the only criterion. Qualitative impact, decisive moments, and season-long narrative also matter. But when missed games approach the regulatory limit, the margin for error shrinks dramatically. Losing games at a decisive moment can suffocate award campaigns that once appeared unquestionable. From a Spurs perspective, the response has been pragmatic. Reinforce preventive protocols, adjust training schedules for players replacing Wembanyama, and above all, maintain the tactical coherence that enabled recent victories. The team has shown defensive resilience and offensive alternatives that reduce complete dependency on the young star, although no one denies that the team's maximum potential is reached with him on the court. Looking ahead demands two simultaneous readings. If Wembanyama manages to complete rehabilitation at the right pace and return before the absences become a problem, the impact will be immediate on both team performance and his individual projection. If, however, recovery drags on, the chances for individual recognition through awards may be severely compromised, and the focus will need to shift to medium-term planning, prioritizing health and career longevity. In the competitive context of the NBA, where small margins dictate outcomes, every missed game represents a slice of exposure and one less competitive opportunity. This applies to titles and personal awards alike. The medical decision regarding when to reintegrate him will therefore be one of the most delicate of the season, requiring clinical insight, sporting sensitivity, and strategic vision. Before we go on, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Your support keeps our Spurs coverage strong and brings you the latest updates straight from San Antonio. And jump into the comments. Tell us what you think about today's news. In a night already carregada de tenseo e expectativas, an unexpected twist erupted moments after the final buzzer, creating an atmosphere of shock throughout the NBA as San Antonio Spurs general manager Brian Wright reportedly slammed his fist on the table and delivered a drastic post-game decision that instantly sent a jolt through the franchise, leaving players, coaches, and analysts scrambling to understand what could have triggered such an intense reaction inside one of the league's most historically stable organizations, and transforming what deveria ser apenas maze capítulo de temporada into a storyline exploding across social media feeds worldwide. Brian Wright's decision, described by internal sources as firm, immediate, and uncompromising, landed like a thunderclap in the locker room, especially because the Spurs have long been viewed as a franchise guided by patience, steadiness, and calculated restraint. Marking this moment as a dramatic departure from the team's usual tone and setting the stage for a wave of speculation about whether this surprising stance signals internal dissatisfaction, strategic transformation, or the beginning of a deeper shakeup behind the scenes. Those present during the post-game meeting claim that Wright's tone was sharper than usual, his words curt as porem impactance, and his expression unwavering, as he outlined a plan that reportedly prioritizes accountability, structural changes, and a complete reassessment of competitive mentality. A gesture que dixu 8 membros veteranos do staff im absoluto silencio, aware that the franchise may be entering an unprecedented phase of urgency. Early reports suggest that Wright's frustration stemmed not from a single play or isolated moment, but from a pattern of inconsistencies that have plagued the Spurs throughout the season, fueling a belief within the front office that certain standards were slipping and that stronger measures were required to reconnect a keep aos valores fundamentais de organização, something rarely seen so explicitly stated in public or private settings. While details of the drastic decision have been kept under tight internal control, insiders insist that it involves significant adjustments affecting rotation hierarchies, player responsibilities, and immediate performance expectations, raising questions about whether some athletes may see their minutes reduced, roles altered, or even their status within the organization re-evaluated with uma velocidade que surpreende 8 analistas experientes. The reaction among players was described as a mixture of shock, introspection, and determination, as many struggled to fully absorb the weight of Wright's declaration, aware that this could redefine dynamics inside the locker room and force individuals to adapt quickly if they intend to maintain their positions within a system now committed to raising its competitive threshold without hesitation. Several young Spurs players, particularly those still in phases of development, reportedly received Wright's message with a sense of urgency, recognizing that opportunities previously considered secure may now require greater consistency, stronger discipline, and more assertive in-game decision-making, especially as the front office seeks to accelerate the franchise's evolution around rising superstar Victor Wembanyama. Wembanyama himself was said to be visibly attentive during Wright's statement, acknowledging that as the cornerstone of the Spurs' future, his influence on the locker room will now need to intensify, not just through numbers on the stat sheet, but through leadership, communication, and setting standards. K reflitum ok GM Dixu claro como neo negociable. Analysts around the league immediately began debating the implications of Wright's actions, noting that although San Antonio is known for being patient during rebuilds, the presence of a generational talent like Wembanyama may have compressed the franchise's timeline, pushing the organization toward decisions that would have previously taken seasons to implement. At the center of this storyline lies the understanding that the Spurs cannot afford stagnation. A special agora que a NBA inteira observa teniment cada passo de evolução de Wembanyama, cuja trajetória pode influenciar as próximas décadas de franquia, making Wright's decisive stance both understandable and strategically necessary under the circumstances. Social media was flooded with reactions within minutes, with fans expressing a mixture of surprise and curiosity, as many began speculating whether roster changes, trades, lineup shifts, or disciplinary actions were looming, given how forcefully Wright delivered his message in the aftermath of a performance he reportedly considered far below what this jersey represents. For longtime Spurs supporters, the moment carried echoes of past eras when the organization quietly reset its internal culture, though rarely with such visible emotion from its general manager, leading many to believe that the team may be approaching a turning point that could shape not only the remainder of the season, but also the identity of the franchise moving forward. Insiders close to the situation claim that Wright has been closely monitoring trends within the team over the past several weeks, tracking patterns in execution, communication lapses, and game-to-game focus, suggesting that this announcement was not impulsive, but rather the culmination of mounting concerns that required decisive intervention. One of the central issues, according to those familiar with internal discussions, revolves around the Spurs' fluctuating defensive intensity, a foundational element of the franchise for decades, and an area in which Wright reportedly expects drastic improvement, especially given the defensive potential that the roster possesses on paper. Wright's message also highlighted concerns about transition efficiency, ball movement, and late-game decision-making, facets that have cost San Antonio multiple close contests, prompting the GM to demand sharper execution and renewed mental toughness from players absorbing key responsibilities. The coaching staff, although not directly targeted by Wright's forceful remarks, has reportedly aligned fully with the new standards, embracing the GM's push for internal recalibration and committing to adjusting tactical approaches to reinforce accountability y recuperar consistencia nos momentos cruciais das partidas. Sources indicate that Wright's decision may also propel conversations regarding potential roster moves ahead of the trade deadline, as the organization now seeks pieces that align with the elevated standards he articulated, possibly leading to unexpected shifts within the rotation or even the departure of players previously thought to be part of long-term plans. Some analysts believe Wright's declaration signals a philosophical realignment, one that blends the patience of a rebuild with the competitive urgency brought by Wembanyama's presence, a combination that forces the front office to act more aggressively in shaping a roster that can grow at the same pace as its prodigious centerpiece. The timing of Wright's announcement, immediately after a highly emotional game, adds another layer of intrigue, as the decision reflects not only frustration but also a deeply strategic moment chosen to ensure maximum impact on the player's mindset heading into the next stretch of the season. Many players reportedly left the locker room in reflective silence, processing the intensity of Wright's tone and the clarity of his expectations, fully aware that individual and collective responses in the coming weeks would determine the next steps of the organization's renewed competitive trajectory. Within the coaching offices, discussions intensified late into the night as staff members began evaluating potential lineup changes, minute distributions, and tactical redesigns that align with Wright's directive for elevated discipline and sharper execution across all phases of play. Sources close to the front office reveal that Wright views this moment as a pivotal crossroads, one in which complacency must be eliminated and a stronger identity embraced if the Spurs intend to capitalize on the rare opportunity of building around a transcendent player so early in a rebuild. Among fans, theories continue to circulate regarding which players might be most affected by Wright's message, with debates emerging about whether certain veterans or young prospects may see their roles shift dramatically as the organization applies a firmer hand toward internal expectations. Across the NBA, rival executives have taken notice of Wright's stance, interpreting it as a sign that San Antonio may become more active in trade discussions and more assertive in pursuing complementary talent to support Wembanyama's accelerated development. Commentators also noted that Wright's intensity mirrors the competitive urgency many elite franchises adopt when preparing to transition from rebuilding to contending, suggesting that the Spurs may be signaling their readiness to accelerate this shift sooner than expected. Observers point out that even though Wright's tone was stern, the underlying message appears anchored in belief. Belief in the team's talent, belief in the players' potential, and belief that the Spurs are capable of far more than recent performances have demonstrated, making his decision less about punishment and more about elevating standards to match organizational ambition. In the aftermath of the announcement, several Spurs players reportedly held private conversations among themselves, discussing how to respond constructively and unify around the challenge set forth by their general manager, a gesture that indicates internal leadership may be strengthening under pressure. Meanwhile, the franchise's development staff began reassessing individual growth plans, searching for ways to accelerate improvements in decision-making, physical conditioning, and defensive awareness to align with Wright's expectations for immediate progress. Team psychologists and performance specialists also entered the conversation, aiming to help players manage the emotional intensity of the moment and channel pressure into productive focus rather than anxiety, ensuring that Wright's message is interpreted as motivating rather than destabilizing. As speculation continues to swirl, it remains clear that Wright's declaration was intended not merely as criticism, but as a spark, one designed to ignite a cultural shift that reinforces accountability, pride, and the relentless pursuit of excellence that once defined the Spurs at their peak. For younger players, the message carries a particularly strong weight, as many now understand that the path to long-term roles within the franchise will require not just talent, but unwavering discipline, adaptability, and commitment to the Spurs' evolving identity. Wembanyama's presence amplifies all stakes involved. Pois qualquer decisão estratégica agora carrega impacto direto no desenvolvimento do jovem astro, imperando a organização a agir com foco, preciso e visão de longo prazo, enquanto simultaneamente exige competitividade imediata. Analysts emphasize that Wright's drastic stance may ultimately serve as the catalyst the Spurs needed, transforming frustration into momentum and marking the beginning of a new chapter defined by higher standards, stronger synergy, and a more assertive organizational philosophy. Although uncertainty still surrounds the exact nature of Wright's impending changes, one conclusion is undeniable. The Spurs are no longer content with incremental progress. They're demanding evolution, urgency, and total commitment from every individual wearing the silver and black. The next games will function as a real-time test of resilience, revealing whether the roster is capable of internalizing Wright's message and elevating its performance to match the expectations now firmly established by the general manager. For the coaching staff, the challenge lies in translating Wright's words into tangible strategic adjustments that maximize the team's talent and create clearer roles that minimize hesitation and maximize execution. As the narrative continues to unfold, many across the league eagerly await signs of how the team responds on the court, as a strong reaction could validate Wright's bold approach and position the Spurs as a rising force more rapidly than predicted. Conversely, a lack of improvement may trigger even more drastic measures, as Wright has now made it unmistakably clear that mediocrity will not be tolerated in a franchise aiming to reclaim its position among the NBA's elite. Ultimately, Wright's table-slamming moment may be remembered not for its dramatic delivery, but for the transformation it inspires, potentially serving as the turning point that shifts the Spurs from a rebuilding curiosity to a formidable competitor. What began as a heated post-game outburst now stands as the defining fire that could strengthen the team's resolve, sharpen its habits, and elevate its identity around a unified mission driven by ambition and accountability. And as the dust settles and the Spurs move forward with renewed clarity, one truth echoes through every corner of the organization. Brian Wright has drawn a line in the sand, and from this moment on, the San Antonio Spurs will rise or fall by how they choose to respond to the standard he has demanded, a standard rooted in urgency, excellence, and the unwavering pursuit of winning. That's it for today's update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay on top of every exclusive San Antonio Spurs news drop, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. And don't forget, your opinion matters to Spurs Nation. Share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next video.